On February 7, 2023, a routine walk in the Montgomery County, Texas, forest would uncover the body of a woman. But what seemed like an ordinary discovery would soon spiral into a tale darker than anyone could imagine. This is the chilling case of Felicia Johnson, a young woman whose journey to Houston to celebrate her 24th birthday would end in the most unimaginable way. It started on an ordinary morning, just like any other in the quiet town of Montgomery County. A hiker, out for a stroll through the dense, fog-filled woods, stumbled upon something that would haunt the community forever. A torn trash bag lay discarded on the forest floor, barely visible through the brush. But something about it caught the hiker's eye. As he neared, his heart dropped. From the bag protruded what appeared to be skeletal remains. A closer inspection confirmed what no one could have prepared for. It was the torso of a woman. A young woman. The sight was horrifying, but it was only the beginning. The police arrived shortly after, their investigation starting with the grim task of identifying the remains. As soon as they were able, they traced the body back to a missing person report filed just days before. The woman in the bag was Felicia Johnson, a 24-year-old woman from San Diego, California, who had traveled to Houston to celebrate her birthday. But something had gone horribly wrong. The chilling question now echoed through the forest. What happened to Felicia? Despite the identification, the discovery left more questions than answers. Felicia's body was only part of the puzzle. The rest of her body was still missing. What had happened to the rest of her? Was she attacked? Where was she before her remains were discarded like garbage? And then, there was the silence. Felicia had been known for keeping in touch with her family. Her social media, active as always, had gone dark. No posts, no calls, no messages. The questions kept piling up. Why had she stopped reaching out? Had something happened to her during her time in Houston? Or was something even darker unfolding, one step at a time? The discovery of the torso was just the tip of the iceberg. As the investigation deepened, it became clear this was no ordinary case. Felicia Johnson was a woman with dreams as big as the world itself. From a young age, her beauty and charm set her apart, catching the attention of many who crossed her path. But it wasn't just her looks that made her stand out, it was her ambition. She was a model hopeful, constantly chasing the dream of a career in modeling. She spent years perfecting her appearance, honing her skills, and building a presence, determined to make a name for herself in the fast-paced world of fashion. But, like so many others before her, the road to success was never easy. Felicia's life wasn't just about the glamour and the glitz. Beneath the surface, she carried the weight of a complicated family life. As the eldest of 3 children, she often found herself in a position of responsibility, trying to hold her family together after her parents' separation. Her father, Kevin Johnson, was a loving but overprotective figure. After his divorce, Kevin remarried, and the strain of raising 3 children alone became overwhelming. Felicia, strong-willed and protective of her siblings, stepped up in ways that no child should ever have to. But despite the chaos at home, she carried herself with a quiet grace. Her inner strength was her most beautiful quality. Felicia's story was one of escape, a story that could be told by anyone who has ever wanted to break free from the confines of their circumstances. Growing up in a household where happiness often seemed just out of reach, Felicia dreamed of a life beyond the limits of her small town. She wanted to experience the world, not just from the outside looking in, but as a participant. She dreamed of a future that wasn't defined by her past, a future where she could make her own choices and perhaps, just perhaps, find her true purpose. And so, when the opportunity to visit Houston presented itself, Felicia saw it not just as a birthday getaway but as a chance for a fresh start. The city represented everything she wanted: freedom, excitement, and the promise of a new beginning. It was more than a trip, it was the first step toward her dream. Houston was the gateway to the world she had always dreamed of, until everything, in the blink of an eye, would shatter. Felicia's relationship with her father, Kevin, was filled with love, but it was also tinged with concern. Kevin's protectiveness grew stronger after his wife remarried, and Felicia, knowing how much her father worried about her, kept him close through constant updates. Despite her independence, she couldn't bear to let him worry. The bond they shared was special, unspoken yet powerful. And it would be that bond that would lead him to search for her when she disappeared. Little did they both know, that trip to Houston would change their lives forever. In the days leading up to her departure, Felicia was filled with excitement. It wasn't just a birthday trip, it was the opportunity she had been waiting for. A chance to explore a new city, to experience life beyond the boundaries she had known, and perhaps to step into a world where her dreams of modeling could finally come true. Houston was a city of possibilities, and Felicia saw it as the beginning of a new chapter in her life. She carefully packed her bags, not just with clothes, but with hopes. She filled her suitcase with more than just fashion. She packed ambition, desire, and a sense of freedom she had longed for. Her social media accounts, typically filled with pictures of her latest looks and fun moments, became a window into her journey. Instagram was her canvas, and she shared her excitement with her followers, posting photos of herself in Houston, smiling in front of city landmarks, and soaking up the adventure of being in a new place. Her posts were bright, filled with joy, capturing the essence of a young woman living out her dream. She explored the city with the carefree energy of someone who believed the world was hers for the taking. Her last few updates were filled with hope, capturing moments of her excitement in Houston, dinner dates, beautiful views, and the energy of the city lighting up her world. But behind the smiles, there was something darker, a feeling of unease that lingered in the air, unseen by her followers. Felicia's eagerness to dive into new experiences was undeniable. She was ready to embrace life, to take risks, to push herself beyond her comfort zone. Yet, there was an undercurrent of uncertainty that no one could see. Beneath the pictures of joy and laughter was a young woman testing the waters of a world she wasn't entirely familiar with, a world where danger lurked in places she hadn't yet learned to recognize. And just like that, without warning, the post stopped. The updates ceased. The world that had once been filled with her vibrant presence suddenly went quiet. In the blink of an eye, she had disappeared, vanished from the digital world she had so carefully curated, leaving nothing but unanswered questions. As her followers scrolled through her feed, wondering what had happened, Felicia's family was already beginning to feel the dread. Something had gone horribly wrong, and they had no idea just how deep the mystery would go. It started with the first missed call, then another, and another. A few days into Felicia's trip, her father, Kevin Johnson, began to notice the pattern. His daughter wasn't answering her phone. At first, it was easy to brush off. Maybe she was busy, maybe caught up in the excitement of Houston. But as the days passed, the silence grew louder. Felicia, who had always been in touch with her family, who always sent a text or shared an update on social media, was now completely unreachable. The calls went unanswered. Her social media, once filled with moments of joy and excitement, went completely still. No posts, no photos, no updates, just emptiness. And that emptiness began to gnaw at Kevin's gut. As a father, he knew something wasn't right. His daughter was out there, alone, in a big city, and now, no word, no sign, nothing. As the silence stretched into days, Kevin's concern turned into panic. The doubt in his mind was quickly replaced by a cold, sinking fear. He reached out to the police, desperate for help, hoping they would take his daughter's disappearance seriously. But the response he received wasn't what he expected. To them, she was just another young woman who had gotten caught up in the thrill of the city. Another girl off on an adventure, not worth the urgency he felt in his heart. The days turned into a week. No leads, no information, just the haunting silence that hung over the Johnson household. The police were dismissive, and Kevin was left with a growing sense of dread. This wasn't like Felicia. This wasn't her. Kevin knew he couldn't sit back and wait any longer. As a father, he had to take control. He began reaching out to anyone he could find, posting flyers, gathering information, and working tirelessly to track down his daughter. Every waking moment was consumed with worry, with the unrelenting question, where was Felicia? Her absence weighed heavily on him, a constant ache in his chest. His daughter's life was slipping away from him, and all he could do was keep searching, even when the world around him seemed indifferent. The silence was suffocating, and Kevin's heart knew, deep down, that something terrible had happened. In the desperate hours following Felicia's disappearance, Kevin Johnson knew he couldn't wait for the police to take action any longer. With the silence stretching on and no progress being made, he turned to a private investigator, hoping they could uncover something that the local authorities had missed. The investigator immediately began tracing Felicia's phone, desperate to track her movements and find any sign of where she might be. Then, a breakthrough came. The phone pinged, its last known location marking Bear Creek Park, a remote area on the outskirts of Houston. Kevin felt a mixture of hope and dread wash over him. This was the first real lead, but it was also the kind of place where nothing good should ever happen. The investigator rushed to the scene, and what they found was chilling: Felicia's phone, discarded on the side of the road, covered in blood. The sight was enough to confirm the family's worst fears. Felicia had been in this area, and something violent had clearly occurred. The phone, once a symbol of connection and communication, now felt like a cruel reminder of what had been lost. The blood-soaked phone was all that remained of her connection to the world, a heartbreaking sign that Felicia was in trouble long before she vanished without a trace. But despite the shocking discovery, the Houston Police Department remained slow to respond. The case was dismissed as just another disappearance, another young woman off to explore the world, perhaps choosing to vanish on her own. To them, it wasn't urgent. To them, it was just another routine case. The idea that something darker was at play never seemed to cross their minds. But for Kevin, the sting of indifference from the authorities only fueled his determination. The phone was the only tangible piece of evidence they had. The private investigator continued the search, leading them to Bear Creek Park. They combed the area thoroughly, but it was a dead end. The park, large and dense with overgrown trees, offered no answers. The investigation stalled, and for a moment, it felt like they were right back at the beginning. No new leads, no new hope. Kevin's heart broke with every passing day, but as the investigation trudged on, he knew one thing. He would not stop searching for his daughter, no matter how many dead ends they faced. Felicia's silence had become a constant weight, and it was only getting heavier. As the search for Felicia stretched on, one lead surfaced that would alter the course of the investigation forever. The police, still struggling to piece together the events of her disappearance, discovered something that had been hidden in plain sight. Felicia's last known interaction was at a place called CoverGirls, a local club in Houston. She had applied there, hoping to find work as an adult entertainer. The club rejected her, but it was her actions immediately afterward that would become the focus of a chilling new revelation. After being turned away, Felicia didn't hesitate. She immediately left the club and ordered a taxi, or so it seemed. The hours following that moment remain a void. Felicia was never seen again. The taxi ride was the last breadcrumb that the investigators could trace. Where did she go after that? What happened in those final moments before she vanished from sight? Kevin Johnson, still reeling from the initial confusion and frustration of the case, knew he couldn't just rely on the authorities. As the silence grew deafening, his own search led him to uncover a dark underbelly of the club that had been kept hidden from the public eye. The more Kevin dug into the club's history, the more troubling the details became. He found reports of suspicious behavior, ties to dangerous individuals, and whispers of shady dealings that painted CoverGirls in an entirely new light. It wasn't just a strip club, it was a place where things went wrong more often than anyone cared to admit. Stories of missing women, abandoned promises, and the grim whispers that followed those who had been there began to surface. With each new detail Kevin uncovered, it became clearer the club was more than just a backdrop to Felicia's story. It was a key player in a much darker narrative. This discovery became the turning point Kevin had been desperately waiting for. The investigation, once stagnant, was now charged with a new sense of urgency. The police, who had once been indifferent, began to pay attention. But for Kevin, this newfound lead only deepened his heartbreak. His daughter, a bright and hopeful young woman, had walked into a nightmare she couldn't have possibly known existed. And now, every step he took only led him closer to the truth, a truth far darker than he ever imagined. As the investigation deepened, the shadow of suspicion began to fall on a man who had been in contact with Felicia in the days leading up to her disappearance. Chukwuka Noah Obodo, a Nigerian-American man living in Houston, emerged as the key suspect in Felicia's tragic story. The connection between him and Felicia had seemed innocent at first, a simple arrangement for a $500 meeting, an exchange made through an online escort service. But what seemed like a routine transaction would soon unravel into something far darker. Noah Obodo, an individual whose past remained hidden beneath layers of charm, quickly became the center of the investigation. As detectives began to trace his movements, unsettling details emerged, details that painted a disturbing picture of a man with a history of violence. There were previous encounters with women, some with alarming reports of assault, and an extensive criminal background that painted him as more than just a man with questionable intentions. He was someone with a pattern, a history of crossing lines, and a disregard for human life. The more investigators uncovered, the more chilling the truth became. Noah Obodo's suspicious behavior was cataloged meticulously. Authorities discovered that in the days surrounding Felicia's disappearance, Noah Obodo had purchased a series of items that raised red flags: gloves, garbage bags, and a kitchen saw. The pieces of the puzzle began to come together, and they pointed to something far more sinister. This wasn't just a casual encounter gone wrong. No, this was a calculated and premeditated act. The investigation reached its breaking point when detectives uncovered something that made their blood run cold. Noah Obodo's internet search history revealed a dark and twisted side of him. A series of disturbing questions about how to commit murder, how to cover it up, and how to destroy evidence. It was as if he had been preparing for this moment for a long time, taking steps to ensure that his crime would never be discovered. The shocking twist was undeniable. This wasn't just a chance encounter gone awry. Noah Obodo had planned it. The cold, calculated nature of his actions became clear, and the horror of what had happened to Felicia became even more real. As the pieces fell into place, the question shifted from what happened to Felicia to how long had Noah Obodo been hiding his true nature. The investigation was no longer just about finding Felicia, it was about stopping a predator before he could strike again. As the investigation progressed, a horrifying new layer was uncovered, sending shockwaves through the entire case. The police had already uncovered disturbing clues in Noah Obodo's search history, but what they discovered next would change everything. On the night Felicia Johnson vanished, Noah Obodo's actions were nothing short of monstrous. Details began to emerge about what happened after Felicia entered his apartment. What started as a simple meeting, an exchange of money for a rendezvous, quickly spiraled into something far more horrific. Felicia, it seemed, had put up a fight. Investigators soon discovered that, in an effort to cover his tracks and hide the evidence of his crime, Noah Obodo had dismembered her body. He didn't just kill her. He sought to erase every trace of her existence, cutting her into pieces and trying to destroy any link to her tragic fate. The brutality of the act was incomprehensible. The depth of the horror didn't stop there. When detectives seized Noah Obodo's phone, they uncovered photos that would haunt them forever. Images of dismembered women's bodies, some even more gruesome than they had ever imagined. The photos were not of Felicia, but they were unmistakably part of a pattern. This was not the first time Noah Obodo had committed such an act. He had done this before. The realization struck like a bolt of lightning. Felicia's murder was not an isolated incident. Noah Obodo had been living a double life, hiding his violent tendencies behind a mask of normalcy. Investigators were faced with the chilling truth. Noah Obodo was not just a killer. He was likely a serial murderer with a disturbing history of violence against women. The case that had once seemed tragic but contained was now an investigation into a much larger, far darker web of horror. The more they uncovered, the more they feared that Noah Obodo's killing spree had gone unnoticed for far too long. How many more victims had there been? How many innocent lives had he destroyed before Felicia's? The weight of the investigation grew heavier with each new discovery, and the fear that Noah Obodo might have slipped through their fingers again made the stakes even higher. The tension was palpable. The clock was ticking, and with every passing hour, the horror seemed to grow deeper. Noah Obodo's actions were far from over. The real question now was, how many others had he already claimed? And how far would the investigation go to stop him before it was too late? The moment Chukwuka Noah Obodo was finally apprehended sent shockwaves through the investigation, but it also introduced a terrifying new reality. After weeks of tracking his every move, after uncovering the evidence of his gruesome crimes, Noah Obodo was caught. His arrest was supposed to be the turning point. It should have been the moment the justice system began to close in on a dangerous predator. Instead, it quickly became a chilling reminder of how flawed and broken the system can be. Noah Obodo had tried to escape the inevitable. He had fled from the authorities, moving between cities, evading capture with the calmness of someone who had already planned for this moment. But the police had finally cornered him. They found him, in the early hours of the morning, alone and disoriented, but carrying with him the damning evidence they had been hunting for, incriminating items that would seal his fate. It should have been the end of his reign of terror, the moment when everything he had done came crashing down on him. But as the police stood over him, handcuffing his wrists, something incredible happened. He was let go. A shocking technicality in the case led to Noah Obodo's release. Despite the evidence, despite the photos on his phone, the bloodstains that had been found, and the unsettling details that pointed to his guilt, Noah Obodo was freed. The arrest that had felt like a victory, a moment of triumph for justice, quickly dissolved into frustration and disbelief. How could this happen? How could they have him in their custody, with all the pieces fitting together, only to let him walk free? The questions started to pile up, unanswered and haunting. Why wasn't he kept in custody? Why hadn't the case been handled with the urgency it deserved from the start? The sense of helplessness began to grow, and for Kevin Johnson, the father who had fought tirelessly to find his daughter, the weight of this failure was too much to bear. He had trusted the system, believed that his daughter's killer would face justice. Now, that trust was shattered. What could have been done differently in the early days of the investigation? Could Felicia still be alive if the police had acted more swiftly, with more diligence? The unanswered questions loomed large, and Noah Obodo remained a free man, at least for now. But for how long? How much longer could he hide in plain sight? And would justice ever catch up with him? In February 2023, after more than a year of pain, confusion, and relentless searching, the final piece of the puzzle fell into place. The authorities received a tip about a body found in a remote forest in Sam Houston National Forest, not far from where Felicia had disappeared. The moment the police arrived, the chilling truth was confirmed: Felicia's body had been found. But even as they gave Kevin Johnson the news he had long feared, it wasn't the closure he had hoped for. Only her torso was recovered, her body brutally scattered in an attempt to erase her existence. For Kevin, the grief was overwhelming. In his heart, he had always hoped for a different ending, that he would find her alive, or at least give her a proper goodbye. But now, standing in the cold light of reality, he was forced to confront the horror of what had truly happened to his daughter. The emotional toll was impossible to describe. No parent should ever have to endure the pain of identifying their child's remains. And yet, despite the agony, Kevin's resolve did not waver. The pain of losing Felicia was a wound that would never heal, but his commitment to finding justice for her, and for all those who might fall victim to Noah Obodo, remained unbroken. "I will never stop searching for justice," he vowed, his words filled with the raw pain only a father could know. He would not rest until Noah Obodo was caught, until his daughter's killer faced the consequences of his monstrous actions. But the case was far from over. Noah Obodo remained a shadow, a dangerous predator still on the loose. The police had made little progress in tracking him down, and the questions surrounding his involvement in other disappearances continued to haunt the investigation. Had he struck before? Was Felicia just one of many victims? Could he kill again? The unanswered questions lingered in the air, hanging over the investigation like a dark cloud. And with that, the case ended on an unresolved cliffhanger. Noah Obodo's whereabouts remained unknown, and the chilling uncertainty of his freedom cast a long shadow over the lives of those still searching for justice. Was he still out there, hunting? Or had he disappeared forever? The haunting question would not go away. Was Felicia's death just the beginning? Was Noah Obodo part of something larger? And would he ever face the justice he so rightfully deserved? The answer, only time would tell. The case ends with Noah Obodo still at large, his freedom an ever-present threat. The investigation continues, but the haunting fear remains. Will he ever be caught? Or will he slip through the cracks once again? As the search for justice continues, we turn to you, the viewers. What do you think? Do you believe Noah Obodo is working alone? Or is there more to this story that we haven't uncovered yet? Let us know your thoughts in the comments section below. And if you want to stay up to date with this ongoing case, don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell. The search for truth is far from over. Stay tuned.